Good to go. Josh, we're ready.
Hi, everybody. I'm Izzie Steckler, and before we start, before I introduce our speaker and interviewer, I'd like to just speak for a few minutes about United Hatzalah. And for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, you can ask your questions in the chat. So this all started around 30 years ago when a 15-year-old Israeli EMT was on an ambulance in Jerusalem, and they were responding to a call. They finally arrived, and it was a 7-year-old boy who was choking. And for 20 minutes, the EMTs tried to resuscitate the boy, and it happened to be that there was a neighbor who was a doctor who ran in, saw the ambulance, and had a dog in tow. And unfortunately, you know, they came too late, and they couldn't save the boy. So this really tragic event is what spurred Ellie Beer, who was this 15-year-old EMT, to start United Hatzalah. So as I'm sure as many of us know, United Hatzalah is an emergency response organization that is comprised of over 6,000 volunteer medics, and they have an unbelievable 90-second response time. And the name in Hebrew is United Hatzalah. So I was just thinking about it this past week, and you know, like every rabbi does, they take the words and they make other words. So Yehud is, you can get Echad, and you can have Yachad, and it makes, you know, unified, unity. So I just find that interesting. But some of the other things that are really interesting about this organization is that it's not just, it's focused, it's become a little more global in scope. It's almost, you can say, an ultimate chesed organization. One example of this is that in the recent building collapse at Certified in Miami, people remember the soldiers who were get dispatched all around the world, and they got this. There were a lot of Israelis who were in that building. So the soldiers were helping the people in Miami to find the people who were stuck as well. But United Hatzalah sent psychotherapists to help the people who are dealing with the mental health issues. As well, people I'm sure remember that Ellie Beer was almost died of COVID a couple of years ago. And in response to that, I guess people were searching for things to do, acts of chesed. So when Ellie, thank God, eventually woke up, people in Israel said, you know, you have to come back to Israel. You need to come back right away. And normally it takes a long time when you're in, they have to put him in a coma. It usually takes a long time. After 5 days after he woke up, he headed to Israel. And they said that in you know, as a response to Ellie being, you know, almost on his deathbed to the hall, they United Hatzalah answered over 60,000 calls on a humanitarian basis. And Ellie said, you know, just tell me one story. And I need a little bit of reason. I need some strength, you know, to motivate me to, you know, I guess, to continue on. They said that one night, Friday night, they received a call from an elderly woman who said, you know, a couple minutes before Shabbat started, can you please bring me candles? So an Arab EMT shows up, and you know, I guess he didn't know what was coming on, and the woman, you know, he brought her a bouquet of flowers and 50 candles, and she proceeded to light 15 candles, and I guess his curiosity got better of him, and the Arabic said, you know, why are you lighting 50 candles? She said she was a Holocaust survivor, and every night, you know, since she was a teenager, she lit candles with her mother every Friday night. Even in the camps, she would have pieces, she would find a piece of wood and she would light it for like a second. So, but until COVID hit, you know, every time she was able to light candles. And she said to herself, you know, if I'm going to have to go back to lighting a piece of wood, you know, this will be the last day for me. So basically, let me just rewind for a second. When the Arab medic came in, she said, "You saved my life." So we asked her, "Well, how did I save your life? I just brought you candles." So this is just another example of the wonderful work of United Hatzalah. So these individuals, the cross section of Israeli society that work for United Hatzalah, these are the people that make up United Hatzalah. And we have two special people here today who are going to be speaking. I'd like to introduce Gavy Friedson, our moderator for today, and our very own Dr. Emmanuel, who will be interviewing Gavy. Gavy is United Hatzalah's Director of International Emergency Management, and along with Dr. Emmanuel Moss, Chief of the Division of Cardiac Surgery at the Jewish General Hospital. Welcome to you both.
On your better side.
Everybody, hi Gavy, nice to meet you. Pleasure. Thanks, Izzie, for that introduction. So I guess we have about 30 minutes to chat, and then we'll save some time for a Q&A afterward. Thanks everyone for joining us again, and for everyone who's with us on Zoom. I mean, Izzie spoke a little bit about United Hatzalah, obviously, in his introduction, but do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role in United Hatzalah, how you got involved, and when this all started for you?
Sure. Well, first of all, good evening. It's great to be. It's my first time in Montreal, so it's really been great. And I first started in, I think, one of the first years that I moved to Israel. I was born in Boca Raton, Florida. Moved with my family to Israel in 1999, and I was about 10 years old. And Israel is known for just volunteering all around. Israeli is really just a culture full of volunteering, giving back, whether it's in a soup kitchen, whether it's in an old age home, whether it's in riding on the back of an ambulance like Eli himself did. I really wanted something that would connect me with society in Israel. And I felt maybe it was just a natural being born an adrenaline junkie. I'm not sure, but I needed something that would really connect me with society in Israel. And I thought it would be fantastic to really jump on the back of an ambulance and start writing and experiencing and treating, the society of Israel. And that would also help me with my Hebrew and kind of, take this young American child who was born in Florida to kind of really become Israeli. So at 15, I started volunteering, and I started on ambulance. At 16, I was volunteering on the back of the fire truck, and at 17, I joined the police department until I was later drafted to the military 2 weeks after high school. My parents always joke that throughout high school, I was either picked up or dropped off from school by fire truck or ambulance. It was pretty amazing. And I felt the same frustrations that Eli Beer did, sitting on the back of an ambulance. It's a great idea of what an ambulance does in terms of a method of transport and transportation, but it doesn't save a person's life. It doesn't get there in those first critical moments when a person's really in need of oxygen, in need of heart resuscitation. I'm sure as a cardiologist, you know how important time is our biggest resource. And coming up with the idea of being able to maneuver through the traffic, well, knowing the traffic in major cities, especially in Israel, being able to get there in 3 minutes or less is the biggest game changer for United Hatzalah. And having this ambucycle, which is a modified ambulance, everything that's in the ambulance is on the back of one of these motorcycles. And with that, we have the tools to respond to any emergency within 3 minutes or less.
Oh, I wish we had that response time inside a hospital. I don't know how you can do that in an entire country. It's amazing.
Louder.
Sorry?
Louder.
Any specific?
Need a microphone?
No, it was next. I'll just be louder. That's okay.
Okay.
Any specific experiences that have impacted you? I mean, you've obviously been involved in a lot of calls, a lot of emergencies. What's it like for you to be involved in? What really sort of sticks with you in those things?
Sure. So as a medic I've responded to over 10,000 calls since I've started volunteering with United Hatzalah. From the age of 15 all the way till today. In the last several years, I've served as one of the leadership roles in responding internationally. I was just recently on one of the rescue flights that go to Ukraine. We went to Warsaw. We brought back a whole 175 Ukrainian refugees to Israel. I got to help with out in Miami with the Surfside collapse. I got to do a lot of different roles with the hurricanes in 2017 in the United States, Houston, in Florida. In terms of all the recent stabbing attacks, terror attacks. When I first started volunteering, it was towards the end of the second Intifada, so I was dealing with a lot of the buses that were blowing up. And just last May, exactly a year from this coming week, we will have Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, which kind of triggered the last week of all the rockets coming down in Israel. And just last year, I joined the team in Israel. I left my wife here and I went straight back to Israel, and I spent a couple of nights in our bomb shelter in Sderot, right on the border of Gaza. And every 10 seconds, we had to find shelter as rockets were literally raining down for a week straight. And we were the first responders being able to respond to any home that was directly attacked or directly hit, in which was not intercepted by Iron Dome. So many stories, and that's just like on a large level, right? I mean, responding every day on an ambu-cycle is just an amazing cover. It's really just be able to what an honor to really just going about your day, your everyday life. We have 6,500 medics, Jews, Christians, Muslims, all walks of life, who stop what they do every single day to just help a fellow stranger, help a fellow person in need, help a random, they don't even know them, right? They don't even know what it's going to be. It could be one call, it could be 4 calls. You could be stuck for 40 minutes now in a CPR. Hopefully it goes well. Not all of them do. Throughout the pandemic, we were on the front lines of literally just one of the worst shutdowns in our lifetime. All these medics having to, and again, they're all volunteers. All of a sudden they're going to a call, then they're put in isolation. They're not with their families for a week or two. So these past 2 years have been very challenging, from the Israel threat, the pandemic. Last year we had Miron with the mass casualty stampede in Israel, where many people lost their lives on Lag BaOmer. And then just the international relief efforts, especially with Ukraine, where we've had, hundreds of our medics back and forth just on the borders of Ukraine helping out.
Oh, incredible. I imagine you must have, being involved in this many emergency calls, will you ever see someone later on, so a few months or years down the line, that said, hey, you help me out? And, does that ever?
It does. It's funny because you're a doctor, so people always ask, how do you deal with it mentally? And I think one of the healthiest things, actually, being a first responder, is actually the disconnecting, in a sense. Kind of, they say, oh, you're desensitized, but it's kind of nice in a way. You kind of disconnect from your patient. You don't know what happens. It's healthy because you never know. And if you have to get connected emotionally to every single call, you'd be a mess, right? Not everything is just amazing. It's life, but I think the successful ones are really always amazing. And I've gotten to randomly in Israel in the Shuk, I'd be in a pizza shop. Actually, the last time I was in Israel a few weeks ago, I was in Marzipan in the Shuk, where the chocolate rugelach, and the owner of that shop had a traffic accident a couple of years prior back by the Inbal Hotel in south of Jerusalem, right near Liberty Bell Park. He got hit by a car. I was one of the first responders there to treat him. And years later, he still remembered me. And I was coming to check out with a box of rugelach. He's like, no, you're not paying for this. I know who you are. So I've had that. I've had that in a pizza shop. And it is kind of nice, right? That they remember you, because even those, whether it's 2 minutes or 5 minutes, you make a big impact on people's lives. And especially, if you're really able to get there in those first 90 seconds and make a difference. And we have 6,500 medics doing this every single day, responding to over 3,000 calls a day. And since we started, over 5 million calls, over 5 million people we've saved. So it's really just a tremendous honor for all of us.
Yeah, amazing. I have to say, I've known about local Hatzalah for a long time, but sorry about my ignorance, but I'd never actually heard about United Hatzalah before looking into this event. So can you explain a little bit how United Hatzalah differs from the local Hatzalah that maybe more of us know about?
Sure. So, Hatzalah is the Hebrew word for rescue, to save someone. Some people, mix it up with Hezbollah.
Yeah.
It's not that. Now we have the orange flag, not the green. But Hatzalah, the concept, was actually started in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, 1960s. And the concept was great, mostly ultra-Orthodox, and there's many Hatzalahs all around the world. They do incredible work. In most cases, it's ultra-Orthodox or just religious men who are able, I think they must be married as well in order to volunteer. Our concept is a little bit different. We're the largest United Hatzalah. In 2006, during the Second Lebanon War, that's when we kind of took up branches of many different Hatzalahs in Israel and kind of combined itself, because during the war, we realized almost similar lessons that were learned from 9/11 in the United States with the Twin Towers, with the collapse, and how the FDNY and the NYPD were not coordinated on the same channels. Firefighters were going up, the other, the NYPD were going down. One knew the tower was going to collapse, one didn't. They weren't coordinated. There were too many chefs in the kitchen and not on the same channel. And in 2006, during the Second Lebanon War, we almost had the kind of very same similarities. And we realized it's not going to work like this. We're a very small country the size of New Jersey. We need to be together. We need to not have all this politics of only a male, only a female. We're treating everybody. If someone's going to need a CPR immediately, I don't think the person cares if it's a man or woman, gay or straight. They need it, right? And that's when we kind of combined it to becoming called United Hatzalah. And we combined all the Hatzalahs in Israel. And we became one of the largest first response organizations in Israel. And now we respond, we're fully independent. We don't have any government support. And we respond to every emergency within 3 minutes or less. And Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, most cases 90 seconds. So it's very, very powerful in terms of how fast and efficient we are. We look at ourselves almost like the Uber of saving lives. An Uber, we call it, in New York, it makes more sense to call an Uber than it does to call an ambulance when you see they're stuck in traffic. But the technology is very similar, because in Uber, you're calling for the five closest vehicles and what's available. With us, we're community-based. We're not like an ambulance station. We have an ambulance station here, ambulance station over here, two ambulances, and depending on if someone's available, they're able to respond. And if these two are at a car pileup over here, then nobody's over here. So we took the map of Israel from Metula all the way up north, down south to Eilat, cover the entire country with medics. Everyone's trained, everyone's in a region, and the whole entire pie is covered. And we're able to respond by finding the 5 closest medics to any emergency.
Wow. How big is the command, that Hatzalah command center? Like, how does that even, is this just all technology working?
It's technology, well, it's humans, operating the phones, but it's technology. Every medic has a walkie-talkie, has a system on their phone built in, GPS location, and it's commanded 24/7. We have, even on Yom Kippur, you'll see ultra-Orthodox Jews. Well, what's nice about us now, with having, over 300 Israeli Arabs that volunteer with us, it's amazing to see how the two of them combine, the two cultures, and it's everything you don't see on the news. Thursday night's cholent night, and you'll have all these Arab medics having cholent. And Saturday night, you'll have falafel. It's just really amazing to see everybody working together in the office. On Yom Kippur, it's mostly completely manned by our Arab volunteers. And then in Ramadan, it's the opposite. So it's really nice to see that mix.
Sorry, Maddie unfortunately has to go to an emergency, and Izzie will take over.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Doctor's getting a 90-second.
I'm like sweating here.
Maybe you got 90 seconds?
There you go. Am I vote?
Yes.
There goes the cardiologist. Doctor, 90 seconds.
All right. I don't have a medical degree, unfortunately, but I'll have to make do. So I think we got to, I guess, the international scope of the work that Hatzalah does. So can you touch, I spoke briefly in my intro about how you guys went to Surfside and Hatzalah. So can you talk about, especially recently in Ukraine, what has Hatzalah done?
Sure. So first of all, it's just unbelievable to think that United Hatzalah has accomplished what it's accomplished in the past few months, and was the first international medical organization on the ground with a field hospital for anybody. And that's literally because we have a partner chapter in Ukraine, in Odessa, in Oman, and Kyiv prior to the invasion, prior to the war. And we just had the infrastructure set up. We had the medics there. We would always, especially on Rosh Hashanah and Lag BaOmer, we always had, whenever they decided to, have the masses would go up to Rabbi Nachman's grave, we'd always have our medics set up for any kind of, possible incident. And we had ambulances there as well that were in partnership with Hatzalah in Ukraine that we would completely, we were in charge of. And when the war started back in February, I remember that Thursday, we already were the first group to have already had 5 medics sent from Israel. These were guys who had been to Nepal, been to Haiti, been to Florida, been to Surfside. Specializing in natural disasters and the best of the best. Realizing, let's go send our first team there and see what we need. And I think the world didn't even realize what was about to happen. This is a population of 40 million. And all of a sudden, if we look today, we're at almost 15 million refugees. Yeah. So we immediately that Saturday night, right after Shabbat, we had a team of 150 medics on a plane to Ukraine with medical equipment. And the entire plane was full of cargo with just humanitarian supplies. Most of the people trying to flee it was very cold at the time, it was still winter. And then we just started taking over Moldova's border. The shul there completely became a Hatzalah command center.
So why did you choose Moldova and not Ukraine?
Well, the community there also knew us and knew Ellie and asked us because they've seen what we've done all around the world years leading up to this. And it was just a great location for us. Most of the other countries like Poland had the United Nations, it had International Red Cross. For some reason, Moldova, no one was there. And it was kind of like an empty void that United Hatzalah just realized there was no one there. And so many people are coming in through there. And we realized that's going to be a great spot to set up. And we ended up chartering almost 36 planes and bringing 4,000 refugees from Ukraine to Israel. The second they crossed the border, they get stabilized, they get checked. A lot of them were just very cold and very hungry. We were able to feed them. Some of them needed IV drips before they're able to be processed with representatives from the Israeli government, who were then able to then take them and figure out the documentation, bring them to Israel. And whether they're in Israel for a 90-day visa or in a family and stay and make Aliyah and move there, it's very possible. We're just focusing on the first response medical side.
I know you mentioned earlier that United Hatzalah represents facets of Israel, like it's like a mosaic of all the different sectors of Israeli society, and it's a picture that the media, especially the Western media, when people think of Israel, they think of the war, or the conflict, or Israel versus the Palestinians. I know that Eli Beer has given TED Talks. He speaks frequently at APAC. Is United Hatzalah, are they trying to present itself as kind of an ambassador of Israeli innovation and put a good face on Israel, or is it just trying to mainly stick to what they do best, which is saving people?
Well, there it is. What we do best is our success is saving people within 3 minutes or less, right? Getting there that fast, being able to stop the bleeding, resuscitate someone, start CPR, deliver a baby. One of my favorite stories is I actually delivered my math teacher's baby when I was 15 years old, riding on the back of an ambulance. It's funny because I started again during the second intifada when buses were blowing up, and my biggest nightmare is delivering a baby. But that's also a great excuse of why I don't like math. But who would have known, right? You never know in the first response world what you're going to end up, what you're going to stumble upon, right? Just my last visit during COVID, when everything was locked down in Israel, literally nobody was outside. I had to do a 2-week quarantine. After 14 days, I'm finally free. I'm allowed to go outside. I walked down Ben Yehuda just to see Jerusalem. So surreal. Everything's just closed. There's nothing. Walking through the streets of Jerusalem, and I get to Ben Yehuda Street, and I'm walking down, and there's just a few people. And out of a hot dog stand named Zalman's, right there across from Cafe Ramon, and I see an older man just collapse in front of me, 75, 78, just collapse in front of me, and immediately, obviously as a medic and been to many calls, I knew exactly what to do. I could see the commotion of people starting to freak out, look for a cell phone. One person started calling, so I quickly ran over there. I took over the cell phone. I was on the phone with Hatzalah with the dispatch, and I started CPR. He literally went into cardiac arrest, and I started chest compressions on him. About 2 minutes later, another medic came, paramedic, with all the life-saving equipment, ALS, intubated him right there on the spot. And within 20 minutes, we brought back his pulse, his breathing, really saved his life. The ambulance came, was shocked to see he was already standing and ready to go, walked into the ambulance. It was quite a miracle. And then afterwards, the owner of the hot dog stand offered everybody a hot dog.
Oh my goodness.
I wasn't hungry at the time. But it was just so what a feeling, right? I decided just to randomly take a walk to explore Jerusalem, and then what are the chances that I was just able to be there with my bare hands to start chest compression? But because I was able to be at the right place at the right time, it made the whole difference, right? And ever since then, my family still calls me and thanks me, and
Wow,
they feel like they have their grandfather back, another chance.
a lot of mitzvah points.
It is a lot of mitzvah points, but think about it, I'm just one of 6,500
Yeah.
people who do this every single day.
So one of the fascinating things I find about United Hatzalah is I feel like it's on the forefront of technological innovation. Are there any new initiatives that are, you know, in the pipeline that you could speak of? Like, I know the AmbuCycle is really an innovation. Are there any other initiatives, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, we try to think of ways to get to any emergency in those 3 minutes, right? So we have ATVs, for all-terrain vehicles that are able to go in the Negev, that are able to go in Masada, they're able to, we have drones for search and rescue capabilities when there's a lot of hikers that either get lost or dehydrated in the Dead Sea. We have, actually, there's over 500 drownings every single summer in Israel. And especially in the Kinneret, and we're the only organization that operates 2 rescue boats in the Kinneret for exactly that. Constantly being innovative, constantly thinking of, you know, a lot of our volunteers in the Hatzalah and the high-tech region in Tel Aviv are volunteers too. And they're always thinking of ways to kind of implement the better idea. One of the ways was like in Tel Aviv, even if you manage to get through the traffic and you get to one of the skyscraper buildings within, let's say, 90 seconds, until you get to the 30th floor, that's another 5 minutes. So we're thinking of ways of actually training members of the high-tech teams and people out there that they can just grab their go bag and respond just by pushing an elevator button. And they can just already have active medics in the building to respond. So innovation and technology comes in lots of different ways, from taking the human side, the volunteer, and connecting it with obviously the resources, the life-saving equipment, and knowing about the call, right? Being able to get there in those first moments.
Using the human capital that is the Israeli, you know, tech sphere. So
Yes.
really, it's amazing.
Yes. The expenses were going up, the uncertainty. We aren't funded by anybody except donations, right? It really comes from community assets, from people stepping up and people deciding to adopt a volunteer, adopt a medic, adopt, you know, whatever it is. But it's not like we're just some organization where you write a check and you don't know where the money goes, or, you know, think you're doing well. That's not at all. We want you to join us. We want you to become a part of our family. We want you to come and visit us when you're in Israel. We want you to see our headquarters. We want you to meet your medic. We want you, when you adopt a medic or sponsor something, you actually get emails and updates of every single thing that equipment is doing. So if you adopt a Michiganer like me, who goes on 160 calls, you're gonna get a lot of emails, but unless you don't want to. But you're getting actual tangible results. You're getting to see an operation of people that are risking their lives every single day, especially on the front lines in Israel. You can see what's going on in the news. You see what's happening there. I was just there just a few weeks ago. We're going back again in just another week. And it's tense, intense times right now. Politically, the Middle East, obviously, the whole world is kind of unstable. But Israel, it's our home. It's our homeland. And United Hatzalah is not going anywhere, and we need the support. We need the support. We need the help. Whether it's a $500 gift or $1,000, or as a community of 45,000 for an ambucycle. It is so important to help us to continue our mission in saving lives. And it's been an honor of my lifetime to have dedicated it to an organization and a cause that actually makes a difference in this world, not just in Israel, but globally. And I will continue to do that.
Well, we really obviously are much appreciative for your amazing work that you and everybody else in Hatzalah does. You mentioned earlier that Hatzalah sometimes gets confused with our neighbors to the north, Hezbollah. I heard an interview where Eli Beer mentioned that a woman wrote a $18,000 check to friends of Hezbollah. And they had some trouble cashing that check. So I think a faster way to help out Hatzalah, not Hezbollah, is israelrescue.org, I believe is the website,
Yeah.
israelrescue.org. And I'm sure people can find a lot more information and donate. And we have a team here in Toronto, Andrea, you're the regional manager?
Yeah, I'm the regional manager, and we have opened a charity called United Hatzalah Canada.
United Hatzalah
So
Canada.
all the donations or the gifts we can give tax receipts for that, and yeah.
And also I encourage everyone, before you leave, there's flyers out there that really give you options of anything you can do to contribute. I really hope you'll just take a look at it and see if you can help us. As you were saying, in terms of, joking or not with Hezbollah, there's 100,000 missiles pointed at Israel at any given moment right now, right? Israel is in a very intense moment. We see what's going on just internally. We saw what happened last May with the mixed cities in Israel. We saw what's happening right now with all the terrorist attacks. I've been very much involved in being a first responder at many of them. We will always be on the front lines, like I said earlier. And just needing, even now for Sderot, look, they're already, today, Hamas and Nasrallah, Hezbollah, was threatening Israel if they continue with this parade next week. But Israel's not going to stop waving the Israeli flag in its own capital. And we need to make sure that we have the armored vests. And that's what saved my life and my team's life when we were in Sderot last year. So there's lots of opportunities to find ways to really help us. And this is all volunteers who risk their lives to just help a fellow neighbor. And we can't thank you enough as a community for just joining us and joining our family.
There are two questions here on Zoom. One of them, Gavy, if you can please address it, is how does United Hatzalah connect with Magen David Adom?
Excellent question. So I actually volunteer as I began in the beginning. I started with Magen David Adom when I was 15 years old. I was riding on the back of their ambulance for several years. A lot of our medics, Eli himself. Magen David Adom was a phenomenal, great organization. They're the largest, ambulance service in Israel. The only difference is, I'd say, is they're 12 minutes, we're 90 seconds. They're an ambulance-based service that gets to every emergency call with the priority of getting there, taking the patient, and then evacuating to the hospital. We're trying to be the first of the first responders. We're community-based, fully volunteer. We don't bill the patient. We don't bill the insurance. We don't collect any money. We're completely independent, no government support, and we're able to respond within those first 3 minutes. We have a wonderful partnership in the field. Think about it, like even in shul right now, you come on Shabbat, it's a very small country, Israel. So there's lots of medics who are good best friends who volunteer in different organizations, and they're all friends. And some would say, well, it's competition. Well, if anything, I would call it maybe friendly competition, but I don't even see it as competition. We don't charge for anything. And if anything, I think Magen David Adom has gotten much better over the years because of our existence, because now they will have some volunteers, they will have some motorcycles, so more people are trained. Great. So in times of crisis, we can have more volunteers and more medics in the field that can help respond. But everyone is working together to save a life.
The fact that, you guys don't get any money from anybody, except from donations, just further illustrates the point how important it is for us. And, people often in Montreal, we look for ways to support Israel. So this is obviously a tangible way to support Israel.
Sure is. What was that other question?
Another question is, why doesn't the government support United Hatzalah? Why are we not funded by the government?
So, excellent question. Why doesn't the government support United Hatzalah? So first of all, lots has changed over the years. we really are working every single day. There's another member of Knesset. Well, right now they're all focused on elections, right? That's what it's been the last few years. So the whole budget either goes to elections or it goes to the safety of Israel, to the Iron Dome, or to the defense systems. That's where most of the budget goes. And if you've been to Israel lately, you'll see the joke is the national bird in Israel is the crane, right? There's a building everywhere. So there's a lot of reasons why they can't start choosing specific organizations and nonprofits to be funding. There are ways that they do help in terms of helping us, getting our motorcycles in and crush some of the bureaucracy that it takes with import at ports, things like that. But we have Knesset members every day coming to us and trying to find ways that we could get their support. 30% of our budget does come from Israel, which is actually a huge amount for a nonprofit. There's a lot of very wealthy Israelis in the nonprofit world from all these exits that they've done in the high-tech world. And we're working very, very hard to get them to be involved. And recently, one of the biggest insurance companies, Harel, so the CEO's father had a heart attack, and one of our medics was first there to save his life. And Harel now sponsors like a whole fleet of our ambucycles. And sometimes it takes for a crisis to kind of strike an immediate family for people to wake up and realize how important it is, what a minute feels like when you need help. It feels like eternity. And knowing that help can get there in 90 seconds, that's the game changer. And being able to get there so fast, efficiently, and well equipped is what makes the whole difference. So yeah, we are working very much on trying to get Israel on board this.
We hear the name Hatzalah, and now we're finding out that you guys are not the only show in town. There's a lot of Hatzalahs. I always thought you're all one group, but you're not. How is the public supposed to know which is the real United Hatzalah?
First of all, everybody's the real one. I have such good friends in all the Hatzalahs, from Miami, Toronto, all over the place. Everyone, they just want to do good in their community. They're all volunteers. They're just different. I always say, definitely, help your community first. That's a given, right? It's wherever you live. Like, that is important to us. That is important to the community. So you have to make sure that, God forbid, you're in an emergency here, that you have help before anyone else. But on top of that, if you're, there's lots of amazing organizations out there. I do encourage that United Hatzalah, especially if you want to give towards Israel, that it would be one of your top priorities. United Hatzalah just happens to be the largest one, and dealing with everything that we're dealing with internationally, we're just able to fill that right now. We're training now. We're at 7,000 medics almost. Hoping by the end of next year we'll get to 7,500 and really grow and cover the whole state of Israel. 90-second response time. Look, I'm part of my role now as being this global ambassador. I'm in communities every single week, not just trying to like push out the idea of United Hatzalah, but I'm trying to also work with governors and state officials and locals and trying to see ways that they can encourage their community to kind of create something similar. Like they always say, Israel's the country that's shining light upon the world, right? Well, United Hatzalah is shining light on the world. We're really working to help everybody use our model. We know it's successful. We know we can do it. Why should anybody wait 20 minutes for an ambulance when you can get there in 3 minutes?
What are the prerequisites for becoming a medic for Hatzalah? And do you guys have any programs for training new medics?
We do. So in order to become a medic, you have to be 21 years old. You have to do our EMT course, a minimum of an emergency medical technician. We do have paramedics, doctors, nurses, PAs. The minimum requirement is an EMT course of 6 months, twice a week, 5 to 10. If you're able to do the entire course and pass all the exams, you're then shadowed by a veteran medic for another 150 calls where you're going on to CPRs and delivering babies and all the fun things. But you're not allowed to go to the call yourself until you've graduated that as well. Because again, we need to trust that they are highly trained. You have to have your motors, if you want an ambucycle, then you have to have a motorcycle license, I think for a minimum of 2 years, and then go through serious, intense training courses as well. It's very dangerous, we're going through red lights, and we want to make sure that all of our medics are the best of the best in everything they do. And it's wild to just see doctors who, work long hours at the hospitals And all of a sudden, they'll get back on a motorcycle right after their shift. And instead of going straight home to their family, if they get a call, they'll go there first because they know how much that's the difference. But yeah, minimum EMT. And we also have a lot of combat medics that finish the military service in Israel, come to us because they want to continue being a medic in the civilian world. And we have an expedited course for them. They just, learning more from trauma to civilian, teaching them strokes, cardiac arrest, things that, mostly soldiers don't have to deal with. But we'll get them expedited and they'll do their course and then join us. And then what's amazing about it is it doesn't matter what region you're in. It's such a small country. A lot of the times on weekends, on Shabbat, families go to Eilat, families go to the Dead Sea. Wherever they are, people are switching, but wherever you are, you're covered. Because even if I'm a volunteer in Jerusalem, if I'm with my family in the Dead Sea, they still get the call. I still have my equipment. So really just create this network that's covering the entire country.
Elivir mentioned that even if you want to become an Hatzalah member, it depends on where you live. Like there was a guy in Bnei Brak who really wanted to join United Hatzalah, and he kept on bugging them, and there was just no space. So he ended up moving his family to Ramat Gan, a space where they needed people, and then finally he was able to get into Hatzalah. So it's an interesting dynamic.
The number one costume on Purim in Bnei Brak, in this ultra-Orthodox community, is kids dressing up as Hatzalah members. I mean, that costume is sold out every year. It's really wild to see it. Look, there was a story of one of our volunteers who during the pandemic lost his job. Then right after the pandemic, he was supposed to come back. He was jobless. It was show and tell day at this kid's school. His son is in 3rd grade. And he took any job he can get. And it was very, very hard times during the last 2 years. And he became a garbage truck collector. And his hours are 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. every day. And he collects all the garbage. But the rest of the day, he's on an ambucycle, saving lives in the community, going on hundreds of calls. And for a couple of months, it was very hard for his son to do his dad as a garbage collector, but it was more, he brought his dad in as an ambucycle medic, who also drives the garbage truck, and he became the biggest hit.
Was he changing his clothes?
Yeah, I guess. But now everyone in school is just so honored of his child's father. It's just a really amazing thing. Or one of our Arab volunteers who drives our ambucycle into his Arab village every day after work. Star of David, his kids now want to volunteer. Instead of throwing rocks, they're becoming doctors. There's so much good that comes out of this on just a humanitarian level that I think is key to just Israel's future.
Just a practical question. When somebody calls the emergency number in Israel, does it go to you and Magen David Adom or only to them?
Great question. So we don't have in Israel like a 911 where you call one number and it's everybody. We've been pushing that for a while. There's a fire department, there's a police department, there's literally every single person has their own number, yet it's all connected. So whether you call them or you call us, everyone gets the information, we share it. We're gonna know, they're gonna know, we walkie-talkies in each other's dispatches. But we're trying to push also to kind of make it a little bit more clear. But that's just natural Israel bureaucracy. They say there's 9 million people of the population, which means there's 100 million prime ministers, right? Or 2 people, 3 opinions. It's stuff that we're working on internally. Every city has their own red tape bureaucracy, but at the moment, it doesn't matter who you call, we'll get the call or they'll get the call.
And are you allowed to transport to hospital?
Depending on the issue. So again, Magen David Adom, that's primarily what they're supposed to do. They come and they take and they evacuate. We will in certain areas, like if Magen David Adom in a certain region is not able to go and they're busy and they're at a mass casualty or they're dealing with a pileup, of course, we can actually evacuate. And in Meron, at that mass casualty, most of the evacuations were done by us. So it really just depends. But yes, at the end of the day, it's all about saving a person's life, and that's what matters most for any organization across Israel.
You guys do unbelievable work. I'm wondering, how did you get support after you deal with constant trauma? What kind of mental health support does Hatzalah provide for you, as well as do you get training in helping victims sometimes who are also processing?
Sure. So 2 years, 3. Yeah. So in terms of our psychological, mental health, not only for our first responders, but a few years ago, we actually are the first international medical organization that created its own psychotrauma unit. taking psychotherapists, taking psychotrauma, mental health experts, psychiatrists, psychologists, really medical professionals. And this was the first of its kind. You know, it's easy to take an ambulance or a medic and help somebody that was hit by a car or physically wounded. But what about all the trauma that they're witnessing in a shooting attack or any sort of traumatic attack? What about the anxiety and the PTSD that they're witnessing? And we're noticing that it's quite a lot, right? It's very traumatic, and we created a unit that specializes in exactly that. Not only for all of our medics that are able to then decompress and kind of, we do joint sessions and debriefings and work with them to kind of prevent any kind of psychological trauma from mass casualty attacks or anything that they're at. But we're also sending our units. We were at Surfside in Miami. We were at the different hurricanes in Florida and Houston. I was with them. I remember being in the shelter in Dallas when one of our psychotrauma therapists it was just like this long line of people. I was out doing search and rescue with one team. The psychotrauma team was back at the shelter. I finished for the day, come back to the shelter. And then I see a long line of National Guardsmen, like US troops that were there to help with the search and rescue. There's a long line for them to go to see our psychotrauma therapist. I was really shocked at first. I didn't understand why they're in line. I thought it would be other civilians of the community. And it turns out that a lot of these guys never had the help psychologically after Hurricane Katrina. And they were all there trying to meet with our psychotherapist because this whole new hurricane that was happening that they were treating kind of triggered all these past trauma events. We also have a canine unit as well. We have several dogs that go off. We brought a few of them to Surfside, Florida as well. So we take it very seriously. Even what just happened now in Meron with that mass casualty, a stampede. Just a year later, we had all of our medics who were there a year ago, still continuing to do sessions. And we take it very seriously, and we're proud of it. We're able to offer this, and that's why we've been asked to go to so many different communities in traumatic events.
I think it's also just important to emphasize that the United Hatzalah volunteers, they're volunteers. They are working professionals, and they're taking time from their lives and leaving their families to go to these, these zones. So it just shows the beautiful spirit that is of the United Hatzalah.
And we're not just first on scene, we're last on scene, right? Like we might get there in those first 90 seconds to provide medical support, but the psychotrauma unit will come in and they'll spend hours if they have to. There's cases where, they'll clean up a bloody scene for the family if there's a birth or something at home, and they'll actually babysit while the parents care. We will do anything we can to help the community. And no questions asked, and never do we ask for any money for it. It's really just something we take pride in.
Gavy, someone is asking in Zoom, are women able to volunteer?
Sure.
We have female volunteers.
Sure, many female volunteers. We accept everybody that wants to volunteer. Men, women, gay, straight, anyone who really wants to come and help save a life in their community.
Are you able to tell them a little bit more about the Women's Initiative?
Sure. I mean, this really started with Ellie Beer's wife, Gitty, an amazing. Their whole family. There's a name for it. So Ellie Beer, almost in his entire family, his two son-in-laws, they were just many months from the beginning of the
he's the CEO. He's the founder.
He's the founder
of
his wife's also a medic. She started the Women's Initiative. Then there's the daughters. Then there's the son-in-laws. Everybody's involved. So when they take an ambulance or their Shabbat meal, I can't even imagine who's on call and who's not. They've got their vests all around their chairs on Friday night. Everyone's answering the calls. I call it the beer ambulance, right? They're able to, they have their own ambulance, their own private cars. But the Women's Initiative really was started in terms of like ultra-Orthodox communities and places where they're able to just help females who didn't necessarily need a man's presence, if it was dealing with a sensitive issue or childbirth, and really taken off. So we have lots of women that volunteer with us.
What's the craziest call you've ever been on?
Ooh, the craziest call. I don't know if it's crazy. It's probably kind of funny.
Too many to think of?
There's a lot. Look, out of 10,000 calls, it's kind of hard to choose one. Especially just being in Ukraine, dealing with the rescue flights back and forth with this whole operation. Just sitting on a plane and having a lady sit next to you who, when the flight attendant came out giving tuna fish sandwiches to everybody, started crying because she hasn't seen a fresh piece of bread in literally almost 30 days. dealing with the girl behind me, 16 years old, who for a month was trying to figure out how to escape, Mariupol, where she was from. And if you look at that now, it's gone. Showing me pictures on her cell phone. I mean, there's so many, I could talk about, just the human factor of dealing with this situation. One that I'll never forget is there was a fire in my grandmother's building in Jerusalem, right across from the Lev Yerushalayim Hotel, downtown Jerusalem. I was at home at the time. I got the call. I know the address, so of course, any call in that building, I'll stop anything, drop what I'm doing, rush, and in case it's my grandma, God forbid. And she just celebrated her 100th birthday a couple weeks ago. And so I quickly rushed over there, and there was a fire in the building. And I rushed upstairs, got to her building, and there was a fire on the 3rd floor. She was on the 4th floor, and we had to put, towels and everything. And I was just with her. Thank God everything was okay, and the fire department was coming, and they were putting out the fire. And then I came out, taking my grandma out through the bottom, through the steps, through the lobby, and there was all the press there, and they're all taking pictures of this. Look at this young Hatzalah medic saving an old lady. All the press was on me, but they didn't know it was my grandma. But and there's so many stories, really. I mean, it's just, you never know what you're going to stumble upon. You never know what's going to be 2 minutes, what's going to be 40 minutes, what's going to be a mass casualty. I think being able to get to a 6-month-old baby that was choking, I think that's something I'll never forget. Being able to respond to a drowning a couple years ago. I was in Israel over Passover, and I was in Supersal on a Grove Street, if you're familiar, right by Kikar Paris, Parish Square, right across from the King's Hotel. It's actually, there's this building. It's called the ugliest building in Jerusalem. It's kind of like almost like, if you've been there, they're actually going to be demolishing it soon. But I've delivered a baby in that building, and I've also saved a building, another baby in that building, and underneath there's the Supersal, there's a supermarket. And I'm just shopping, doing my groceries, and a call comes out of a drowning on Pinsker Street, which is very close by. And this was Friday, Erev Pesach, and a call comes out for a child who's drowning. And there are a couple of private pools. It happens to be a very wealthy family from Long Island that comes to Israel twice a year in one of their beautiful homes. And their kids were swimming, and one of them was actually drowning. Threw my cart to the side, rushed outside, put on my helmet, got on my motorcycle, and I was there within 2 minutes. And they just pulled her out of the water, and I started CPR. Another doctor came, Ari Jaffe, and we continued CPR, and we saved this child's life within literally minutes of it happening. And I'll never forget that. I mean, who would think? You're grocery shopping one moment, and the next you're saving a baby's life or just drowned in the pool. It's, and I think that it's those cases that actually encourage us every single day to put all the negativity aside and just stay positive and continue to do what we're doing, and know that all of our medics are there for a good cause.
And you continue from strength to strength.
Amazing.
Thank you so much. And
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Very nice. Other aspect also. This problem.